Om Namo Narayanaya, Jai Swaminarayan, Namaste, welcome back. We are continuing our look at some of the lectures of Swami Vivekananda. Today we're continuing his lecture on the women of India. So I've already taken a look at some of this. Actually, I already recorded some of this and then the camera got full and couldn't finish the video. And I was going to warn you right now, there is a few things that might make you go, What? What is that? I will make note of them after the fact. There's a few little points of, I don't want to say contention, but things that are a little questionable. So just bear that in mind and keep watching, and we'll discuss afterwards some issues I have here. All right. That being said, let's pick up where he's talking about women in India and about the Ramayana. The oldest Sanskrit poem in existence, the Ramayana, has embodied the loftiest Hindu ideal of a woman in the character of Sita. We have not time to go through her life of infinite patience and goodness. We worship her as God incarnate, and she is named before her husband, Rama. We do not say Mr. and Mrs., we say Mrs. and Mr., with all the gods and goddesses. The woman comes first. There is another peculiar conception of the Hindu. Those who have been studying with me are aware that the central conception of Hindu philosophy is of the absolute, that is, the background of the universe. This absolute being, of whom we can predicate nothing, has its powers spoken of as she. That is, the real personal God in India is she. This Shakti of the Brahman is always in the feminine gender. Lord Rama is considered the type of the absolute, and his wife Sita the power. We have no time, as I said, to go over the wonderful life of Sita, but I do want to quote a passage from her that is very much suited to the ladies of this country who are before me now. The picture opens when she was in the forest with her husband, where they were both banished. There was a female sage whom they both went to see. Her fasts and devotions had emancipated her body. Sita approached the sage and bowed down before her. The sage placed her hand on the head of Sita and said, "It is a great blessing to possess a beautiful body. You have that. It is a greater blessing to have a noble husband. You have that too. It is the greatest blessing to be perfectly obedient to such a husband. You are that. You must be happy." Sita replied, "Mother, I am glad that God has given me a beautiful body, and I have so devoted of a husband. But as to that third blessing, I don't know whether I obey him or he obeys me. One thing alone I remember, that when he took me by the hand before the sacrificial fire, whether it was the reflection of the fire or whether God himself made it appear to me, I found that I was his and he was mine. And since then I have found that I am the complement of his life and he of mine." Portions of this poem, the Ramayana, have been translated into English. Sita is the ideal of a woman in India and worshipped as God incarnate. Now, I would like to talk about Manu, the lawgiver, and his book, The Laws of Manu. In this book, there is an elaborate description of how a child should be educated. We must remember that it was compulsory with the Aryans that all children be educated, whatever their caste or their sex. After describing how a child should be educated, Manu wrote, "Along the same lines, the daughters are to be educated, exactly as the boys." I have often heard that there are other passages where women are condemned. I admit that in our sacred books there are many passages which condemn women as offering temptation, that being sexual temptation. You can read those passages for yourself. But there are also passages that glorify women as the power of God. There are other passages which state that in that house where one drop of a woman's tear falls, the gods are never pleased and the house goes to ruin. Drinking wine killing a woman and killing a Brahmin are the highest crimes in Hindu religion. I will claim, thus, the superiority of these Hindu texts, for in books of other races there is only condemnation and no good word for a woman. I would now like to talk about our dramas. Whatever the books say, the dramas are the perfect representation of society as it then existed. In these, which were written 400 years before Christ, we find even universities full of both boys and girls. We would not now find Hindu women there, as they have since been cut off from higher education. But at that time, they were everywhere pretty much the same as they are in this country, going out to the gardens and parks to take promenades. There is another point which I bring before you, and where the Hindu woman is still superior to other women in the world. That is, in her rights. The right to possess property is an absolute for women in India as it is for men, and has been for thousands and thousands of years. If you have a lawyer friend and can take up the commentaries on the Hindu law, you will find it for yourself. A girl may bring $1 million to her husband, but every dollar of that is hers. Nobody has any right to touch it. If the husband dies without issue, the whole property goes to her, even if his father or his mother is living. And that has been the law from the past to the present. That is something that Hindu women have had beyond that of women of other countries. Now, the older books, or even the newer books, do not prohibit the Hindu widows from being married. It is a mistake to think so. They give them their choice, and that is given to both men and women. The idea in our religion is that marriage is for the weak, and I don't see any reason to give up that idea today. Those who find themselves complete, what is the use of their marrying? And those that marry, they are given one chance. When that chance is over, both men and women are looked down upon if they marry again. But it is not that they are prohibited from doing so. It is nowhere said that a widow is not to marry. The widow and widower who do not marry are considered just more spiritual. Men, of course, break the law and marry, whereas women, they being of a higher spiritual nature, keep the law. For instance, our books say that eating meat is bad and sinful, but you might eat such and such meat. I have seen thousands of men who eat mutton, for example. Yet, never in my life have I seen a woman of higher caste who eats meat of any kind. This shows that their nature is to keep the law, keeping more towards religion than men. Of course, I would expect that you will judge Hindu men harshly, but please do not. You must try to look at the Hindu law from my position too, for I am a Hindu man. This non-marriage of widows gradually grew into a custom, and whenever in India a custom becomes rigid, it is almost impossible to break through it. Just as in your country, you will find it hard to break through a 5-day custom of fashion. In the lower castes, except 2, the widows remarry. There is a passage in our later law books which says that a woman shall not read the Vedas, but they are also prohibited for weak-minded Brahmins. If a Brahmin boy is not strong-minded, the law applies to him, and he shall not read them. That does not imply that education is prohibited, because the Vedas are not all that Hindus have. Every other book a woman can read. All the mass of Sanskrit literature, that whole ocean of literature is open to her. Science, drama, poetry, it's all for them. They can go there and enjoy and read everything, just except for the Vedic scriptures. In later days, the idea was that a woman was not intended to be a priest, so what is the use of her studying the Vedas in the first place? In that, the Hindus are not so far behind other nations. When a woman gave up the world and joined our order, they are no longer considered man or woman. They have no sex anymore. The whole question of caste doesn't matter either. Man, woman, caste, whatever, it all dies instantly. I will tell you something. Whatever I know of religion, I learned from my master, Paramahamsa Ramakrishna, and he learned it from a woman. And we will pause there. I hate to correct a guru of such caliber as Swami Vivekananda. At the same time, I hate to promote misinformation that I know is wrong. Now, I have said things on this channel which might be wrong. I have made assumptions or whatever. I understand that. But at the time, I didn't know it, and maybe later I learned better. And at times, I've confessed it on this channel, like, yeah, I had that wrong. But I'm reading something here, and I know what is being written isn't quite accurate, and it's different when you know something's wrong versus being ignorant in the moment because you just haven't learned. So I need to make a few corrections, and I apologize to those of you who are followers of Swami Vivekananda. To make these corrections does not imply he is any less than a saint. He is any less than a great teacher. He is any less than one of our greatest teachers. He just has a few things wrong, and I'd like to bring some clarity to them. I almost chalk these errors up to sort of human nature, more so than anything else. We have tendency to do things and say things, and we think we're right, but we're really not. And so he may be thinking he's absolutely right, but like myself, and like I just said, he was in ignorance at the time, and maybe later learned more, or what he thought was true and whatever. I can't blame him for that. So first of all, he opens up talking about the Ramayana. I just want to make a plug, a shameless plug for this channel. I have read the Ramayana. It's here. You can check it out. The Valmiki 7-volume version of the Ramayana is here, so you can read all about the great Lord Rama and his wonderful wife, Sita. Swami Vivekananda says that the power is spoken of as she in India. That is, the real personal God in India is she. This Shakti of the Brahman is always in the feminine gender. I don't know if that's true. Maybe it is, maybe it isn't, but I just think about when I read things, and on this channel you can see what I've read. I don't read she a lot. I do sometimes, but actually I think I've complained that there's not enough talk of Shakti. I read he. This says the power spoken of she. So, but I still don't see she mentioned a lot. And it may be my translations, it may be the branch of Hinduism that I study. I don't know. But I don't know if this is true. Please do not quote this as true until someone who's watching this video can validate it. If that is the way it is, and maybe my translations say something else, or I've just read the wrong things, or I'm forgetting something, whatever. Further, Manu, the great lawgiver. I think we've all heard of the books of Manu. I actually have not read them. As of right now, I have no plan on reading it, because I don't really see it as a Hindu scripture, or a spiritual scripture so much, so I don't really plan on reading it for this channel. So there is a footnote here in this book, and I can't validate it one way or the other. But I think it's important to read the footnote to you. So, first of all, Swami Vivekananda quotes the great Manu and says, along the same lines, the daughters are to be educated exactly as the boys. The footnote says, the text of this sentence is not found in the extant Manu Samhita. So then the question is that a real quote from the laws of Manu? The next sentence, Swami Vivekananda says, I have often heard that there are other passages where women are condemned. So, is he saying other passages in the laws of Manu, or other passages in just books in general? I don't know. I'm not really too sure. It would be strange if he goes, well, the laws of Manu say this. There may be contradictions, I don't know. Because that would kind of imply he hasn't actually read the laws of Manu, and thus he's just quoting things that he's heard. To put it in famous lingo, he's quoting quotes from Facebook memes, but hasn't read the text himself. Which is, well, we all do that, so I don't know. I will say that if that's what he's doing, if he's just quoting Facebook memes and he thinks it's in there, that is why this channel exists. Because I didn't want to do that. I was tired of going, well, so-and-so says this, Krishna says this, but I actually didn't know. And every so often I'd run into a wall where someone goes, not really. Have you read it? And I went, no. and I created this channel to prevent things like this. I mean, I'll do it. It's human nature. But if we can actually read the text and know for ourselves that they're in there, and if we don't know the quote is legit or not, maybe just not use it. That's my point of view. Okay, let's move on. He says that drinking wine, killing a woman, and killing a Brahmin are the highest crimes in the Hindu religion. I don't know. I have heard that killing a Brahmin is one of the worst things you can do. Killing a woman, I'm not too sure about that. As for drinking wine, I'm sure he means alcohol in general. That I don't know if that is true. That may be something of his order. All the orders are a little different. He also says he claims superiority of these Hindu books, for in the books of other races is only condemnation and no good word for a woman. I have read many, many religious scriptures of many religions, and I have not seen a universal condemnation of women. I don't believe you can read the Bible and, for an example, many of us will know, and see the way Jesus treats Mary Magdalene and say that that is a condemnation of women. It is women that discovered that Jesus had risen, that the rock was rolled over, or the tomb was empty, whatever it was. It is women that discovered that. If you condemn women, you're not going to believe them. So we couldn't condemn women because that story wouldn't work. I don't see that. I don't know what he says when he's saying this. I haven't read a lot of Buddhist scriptures, or it's been a long, long time. I haven't read the Quran in a long time either, so I don't remember. But I don't see this universal condemnation. I have to disagree with him on this point. I really, really do. Even in the Old Testament, which is coming to mind now, I don't think there is a universal condemnation of women, and only the Hindu scriptures are positive. I am very sorry. I just don't agree with this. He then goes on to talk about how the universities were full of boys and girls. Maybe this is true, maybe not, I don't know. But things had changed and Hindu women were not in higher ed. There's a footnote that says that since his time, higher education among women in India has spread rapidly. That is a historical fact. But then he says something that's just like, oh, you just don't get it. He goes, "We would not now find Hindu women, as they have since become cut off from higher education. But at that time, they were everywhere pretty much the same as they are in your country, going out in the gardens and parks to take promenades." This was written in 1894. Does Swami Vivekananda not realize that higher education for women in 1894 was really limited? It essentially was teachers' colleges. That's pretty much the only education a woman could get. It was very rare for a woman to have any sort of other type of higher education or even be in a job where such education would be needed. Women were very restricted in society in 1894. So when he says they were pretty much everywhere, just the same as you are, does he really understand the position of women in 1894 America? It was not glamorous. And then he goes, going out in the gardens and parks to take promenades. So is that all women did, is just walked around with their umbrella? That doesn't really say much about women. That really doesn't say much about them. So there's a weird thing here, a contradiction, like, at one point, they were like all of you women here in America, yet the women in America were suffering and didn't have the freedoms they have as I make this video, over a century later. So I don't know what he's talking about. Perhaps, though, he was around women who were breaking barriers, and they did exist. I have a great-great-grandmother, or maybe a sister of my grandmother, who was a total badass. She was like a tomboy, and she did stuff that women did not do in like turn of the century Maine in the middle of nowhere. So women did exist. Mary Baker Eddy comes to mind as a woman who broke rules. She did things a woman wouldn't do in the church, or not many of them did. But for the most part, women had it tough, and he doesn't see that. So maybe he was around women like Mary Baker Eddy or my great-great-grandmother who were very forthright. Or also he was maybe around women who were very wealthy. They were removed from society, so they didn't really give him an accurate presentation. I don't know, but you just heard my little baby girl, Kitty, chime in. She didn't have many thoughts. So this is a discrepancy here that both my little girl and myself, I'm not too sure about. One more thing, he says the older books or even newer books do not prohibit the Hindu widows from being married. It is a mistake to think so. No, it's not. I can actually think of one Hindu text that was written a few decades earlier than this speech was given that actually prohibits women in India who are widows from being remarried. It just right out says widows should not get married. And that text was very influential and written decades earlier. So when he says that it's a mistake to think that any text says that, well, no, he's actually wrong. There was a text that said that for a huge group that, if I'm right, had like 1 million followers, or more than 1 million. I am sorry, Vivekananda, that I have to criticize this, but it's necessary, because if we let this go, it's going to spread some misinformation. And my view is, I would rather tell the truth, even if it hurts, than to spread misinformation that feels good. Because that won't really get us anywhere. It just makes us feel good. But I want the truth, because the truth brings us closer to God. And the truth will always be there. Misinformation will be debunked at one point, and then we have to go, oh, what did we do? What did we do? So, excuse me for criticizing that. The rest of his points are actually fairly good, and he's fairly optimistic, and I may have missed a few things too, but this video is getting rather long. I like to keep it short, so anyways, we're going to keep reading this, and we're going to read other things by him. Just because there's some mistakes doesn't mean I want to throw the baby out with the bathwater. And until then, thank you for hanging out with me and listening to me, and Jai Shri Krishna, Jai Shri Swaminarayan, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare.